Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast.
Commitment starts when motivation stops. Shane Parrish. Phil, what are your thoughts on this? It's a great quote to kick off today's session.
It's a great quote, and it reminds me of a wonderful friend of yours and mine, Josh Phegan. That is Tom Hector,
yes,
for prospecting, where he talks regularly about you got to prospect even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah,
like when you're feeling motivated and you're feeling good and you had a great night's sleep, it's always easy. Yeah, anyone can get in and prospect then, but it's can you do it when maybe you just the chips are down a little bit. Have you got that actual commitment where it's a booking, no matter how the weather is, no matter how you're feeling, you're getting the job done?
Yeah, this is great. One of the first ever quotes I used to use in the big keynotes was, emotions precede action. Yet when you undertake the actions, it changes your emotions. So in other words, like, I don't feel like going for a run, but I go for a run. And after I go for a run, I always feel good after a run. And so from that point of view, it's like no emotions until the work is done. And this is also the other key thing is about like learning how to hack the world in a good way, where like circa 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you write down 10 great people to call tomorrow morning, and you walk in the morning and you know you've got 10 great people to call that are either buyers or sellers or recruits, whatever it is that you're going for, mate, how quickly do you jump into that call session knowing that could just all of a sudden completely change the business?
Yeah, I would say that one quote, I think, is probably the number one separator between the great agents in this country and those that struggle. I think people have this perception that they're superhuman. I think the reality is they just get on and do it even when they don't feel like doing it. So yeah, great quote to kick it off.
You know, today's whole session is all about becoming number one. And there's a great idea here where you start to say, okay, great. I just think it's infinitely easy to be the number one in a marketplace and not the number 15th. And I'm not saying from an ego point of view, I'm not saying from an awards point of view, I'm saying genuinely because more customers choose you. And if you think about that, Phil, you got more opens, you got more auctions, you're meeting more buyers, you're meeting more sellers, you're growing your database faster. Like the way that you prospect is fundamentally different than when you're way out on the edge, just trying to literally weasel your way into a presentation. And if your brand is already on the shopping list where like the vendor's like, well, I've got to get them in. Like that's an important part around what it is that you're actually doing. And so today we're going to talk about that. And the first place I'm going to kick off is about the importance of area knowledge. And so I know this sounds really funny, but if you want to become number one in your marketplace, you're going to know it. And I was having a great conversation with a client and this person had maybe done close to 100 transactions a year in a CBD marketplace in a major city in Australia and was doing really, really well. And it had worked out that the average sale price wasn't as strong as she'd wanted it. And it was kind of like 500 or 600 grand. And all of a sudden gets up one day and walks out across to a completely different market, literally only probably 25 minutes in car, where all of a sudden the average sale price is $8 million. And starts working with a lead agent in that business. And the interesting thing was that I just remember getting this phone call after the first lot of open for inspections and was really upset. I'm like, oh, what's wrong? I'm like, I was there at this open for inspection and a buyer seller walked through and I didn't know. And they asked me what school zone the property was in and I didn't know the school zones. And I felt so silly that I put at jeopardy their sale of their $10 million property at risk, because this particular vendor buyer was in a position that's like, oh, they might downsize the one for 8, but they'd sell their one for 10. But because I didn't know the school zone, I was blown out. Now, technically very capable, could do a great agency agreement, can do a contractor sale, can negotiate with a buyer like this tomorrow, can make all that happen. But area knowledge absolutely matters. And so one of the things that I always think about, if I'm going to come into an area, like what are the things that I'm going to need to know? So that might be conversations around, okay, great, what's the local transport, what are the local schools, what's local doctors, hospitals, shopping precincts, the conversations around what the local councils are, what's happening in terms of density. And then I want to go and have a look at what we go to call the market knowledge about understanding who actually exists in that market. Ages, profiles, demographics, particular strong groups in that community. There might be religious groups or particular ethnicity that's sitting in that market. And I've got to start to think about, okay, great, what do they value and how do we go to present that? Phil, how important is it literally that if you want to become number one in a market, that you clearly define what that market is and then you learn everything about that market as much as you can?
Yeah, I think it's critically important. I think back to when I first started real estate 23 years ago, my first suburb, Josh, was St. Mary's. And I remember hearing a presentation from John McGrath talking about you need to become the product knowledge champion of your area. Like that's your number one responsibility. And so I remember doing really, really basic things of going down to the local council, looking through the historical books, wanting to understand the entire history of the background. I used to have boxes under my desk of, in those days, of the actual bus timetables and all those sort of things that you'd actually be able to hand out to buy and say, here's the 101, jump on the 101 Express into Adelaide or whatever it might be. So you'd have all of that product knowledge. And I think people, it's one of those things, it's probably hard for people to be motivated to go out there and do it because you get no immediate reward for that,
Sure.
So it's not something you go, okay, I'm going to just go and spend a couple of hours really getting upskilled on the local history, on the train transport timetable, the buses, the schools, the primary schools, the churches, the whatever it might be. Because there's no immediate reward, people probably struggle to get there and do it. But when you are actually in that final listing presentation or intimate moment with a buyer, whatever it might be, and you've got that product knowledge to draw upon, that's when it pays dividends.
And this is a great conversation because if you're going to become number one, you've got to know that really well. And, what is the size of that market? And, this is one of our great conversations. We had an agent once who was working in a remote area of Golden Bay in New Zealand, Billy Kerrisk. And it was a great lesson, back in the day, and sale prices were very different to what they are now. But she said, hey, Josh, I want to write $1 million. And we had a look at the total size of market. And Phil, she just needed 250% market share.
Only 250%.
Yeah, but this is the whole idea is that literally agents have the wrong measure. How many houses are there versus how many properties actually sell every year?
Yeah, and I think that's been an issue with the training culture in this country for a long time, Josh. It's always been, okay, the definition of a service area is 1,000 homes and get, 20% market share. Hang on, let's actually start with number of sales versus number of homes, right?
Yeah, so if you want to become number one in a market, you've got to have some sort of forward indicator to know that you're making progress on that. And Phil, one of the key things that I would always say is, okay, great, if it's an auction-based market, what percentage of auctions do you have ahead? How many opens do you need to have every Saturday to be the number one? So even your marketplace, there's 50 listings every month. If you're in a position that the number one agent's got 20 opens, well, mate, you've got to get to 21 opens in order to be able to get into that lead indicator. And that's not necessarily going to be on sales, but you're starting that journey to go and get that. And literally that's important because that's going to determine the size of your team and how many people you're going to need. Because in order to do 20 opens, okay, great, it's 7 opens per person. You're going to need to have a minimum of 3 salespeople in that team to go and make that happen. And so this is actually a really important conversation to understand, well, how big is number one and what would we need to become? And that's the most exciting part is like learning about what's the infrastructure I'm going to need and the people I'm going to need to go and make that happen. How many people have actually really thought that through versus just the egoism of, I want to be number one on the major real estate websites as opposed to actually number one in market for more transactions more often?
I think we live in an industry, Josh, that's obsessed with being number one from a marketing and collateral perspective. But I find very, very few agencies or business owners that are actually focused on becoming number one behind the scenes and actually doing the hard work. It seems like number one is a marketing strategy as opposed to a reality of business operating system.
And this is interesting about everyone can manipulate a statistic like we're the number one at selling houses with red doors, And what you got to start thinking about is that, okay, well, what really matters is also about size and productivity of team. Now, Phil, this is a great one about modeling, right? Because there are some very, very potent boutique independents that have got a very small team, but the number of transactions per salesperson is through the roof. And then as you start to go to those that are majors inside of the industry, they might have a much lower level of productivity per person, but they actually have more market share. So tell us a bit about that. Because I know that's a big difference for you, is all of a sudden you've got some businesses that are definitely number one, you've got some businesses that are growing to number one inside of your business. Do you need to get really clear about the quality of the people, what you can do to improve their level of productivity, to be able to get their performance up, to allow you to get into that number one commanding position?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a blend. It's a combination of all sorts of things. And there's multiple strategies in terms of how to get to number one as well, Josh. So you can have somebody inside your organisation we've got a friend of both yours and mine who recently started with us here in Adelaide, who's a great agent, and look at somebody like that and go, hang on, that's somebody that we're actually going to grow and they're going to take massive market share in their area over time. And so building them up, that's one particular strategy. Or other strategies for getting number one in market share as well, Josh, from a business owner's perspective, is rather than growing it, is actually going out there and recruiting it. And then you actually,
or buying it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right. So our 3 strategies that we use for growing our business or becoming number one is, number one is growing the internal talent. Secondly is actually recruiting it. Or thirdly is via acquisition. Can we actually go ahead and do that? So various pathways of getting there.
And what I love about that is that you've also got a big focus on retention of really good quality people. And I just think that it's like, once you join Harris, we want you to stay here for a really long period of time. We want you to have a really rewarding career. And we're going to provide incredible platforms and all the things that you're going to need to be able to embrace the market conditions of the day and make sure that we're highly successful. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't get. I don't understand. You go down to a beach and one of the things that the lifeguard does is that they give you you the conditions of the day. So high tide, low tide, temperature of the water, are there sharks, all that sort of stuff, right? The interesting conversation is that then you'll make a decision on how you will surf. Now, I'm not a surfer, but I predict that's what they do. But that's the basic idea, is that literally, isn't that the same thing in business? Like, you need to understand the market conditions of the day to then learn how to provide the right training and the right delivery mechanisms to make sure that your people are going to be successful in those markets.
Yeah, I heard you speak about that recently. I was in a training room with you, Josh. I really love that update of just giving people the kind of, today's conditions. And I think from a company perspective, we do that on a Monday morning, live full company Zoom, a quick update from the weekend of what we've listed, what we've sold, what the auction clearance rates were, what's happening with interest rates, and a few little tactics so that the guys can jump on the phones for that Monday morning and get out and get after it.
So, Phil, quick question for you. Like, how important is it, in becoming number one, to building your marketing engine?
Elaborate on marketing engine.
So like thinking about how we're going to position brand, where we're going to be in marketplace, how we're actually going to attract customers, how we're actually going to be in a position that we're going to generate those leads. The reason I'm saying that in terms of a marketing engine, right? I was having a look at one of the major, real estate websites the other day for a particular brand in Australia. And they have, in the past, been one of the most successful. And mate, there was an Instagram post about how you need to clean your windows so that more natural light can come through when people are there at open homes. And I just thought, for a major, how cringe is the marketing, man? Because you've just put another barrier for a vendor coming to market. Whereas I know that, Harris, in your world today, well, that would be something you would recommend as a part of getting the property ready, and you would get a supplier out to come and quote and get all the windows cleaned before you even take it live to market. But take the pressure off of the vendor having to do everything and get them a quote and get some other people to do it, because it's a big thing to get a property ready. And to me, there's a massive disconnect between, like, what is the purpose of that marketing item that they put on social versus literally being able to generate a lead and really making things happen about how customers actually want to know. Like, on your end of that stick, the same day that they're posting about cleaning windows, you've got the Harris market report about what's actually happening in Adelaide, why buyers are buying, why sellers are selling, why you got to do stuff in spring. You're running a narrative. Like, the two worlds couldn't be further apart about what's actually valuable to a customer and what is actually just another reason why I can't go to sell.
And probably, the areas that we focus on, you've got that, larger Harris corporate brand at play, Josh, where we're continually looking at how can we be market experts and providing helpful information. But then also now, Josh, like the agent's personal brand and personal marketing is incredibly important as well. So they're kind of the two spheres we play in. How do we provide marketing tools and strategies for the individual agent? Because ultimately they are the custodians of the Harris brand. Like, they're the ones that get out and grow the Harris brand through both their personal exposure and their personal brands.
Yeah, this is a great conversation, because when you think about what you're actually doing at a marketing level, marketing is the battle of perceptions. And, the interesting conversation is, if you want to become number one in the marketplace, you've got to decide how you're going to do that. Now, you've got a couple of vehicles, right? You've got agency and brand type marketing, you've got agent marketing, and then in addition to that, you've got property marketing. How do we be the best in the world at each of those? That actually really helps us to go and build that. And if you think about building data versus working data, how do I actually build a lot of data quite quickly? Now, in the very early days, you did your market reports and people get a copy of those. When they got a copy of the Harris report, and all of those things were literally designed to go and build up that database until you got to critical momentum. Now, let's say, for example, that we take Harris and we put you in a market that you're not in. Let's say all of a sudden we go to Darwin. Yep. That's a completely different game for you, because, geez, we don't know many people up in Darwin, and how would we do that? Now, if we were going to do a startup, like, far out, we'd really have to push hard on the marketing engine that Harris has arrived and XYZ and all the above. But you'd also have additional strategies about the quality of the people that you're trying to recruit. You'd maybe buy a business and rebrand it. There's a whole range of things that capital gives you the ability to do. If you don't have capital, then you've got to get really, really clever about what it is that you're going to do to go and build that audience and get in front of those people more often. Now, to me, this is important, that in order to win, you've got to map out your sales process. If I said to you, like, Phil, like, how many agents do you think just know how we actually generate our leads? Like, how many of them, like, really understand that versus just keep on doing activity? Because, when a market goes soft on lead generation, I hear agents go, "Hey, Phil, got this great idea, bus ads." And I'm just wondering, you don't do those, do you? But I'm just trying to get you to think about,
no, we don't.
Do they actually understand how that business generates leads?
I have suggested it, though, so that's kind of making me laugh.
Yeah, but how important is it for people to actually understand how we generate leads around here?
Oh, I think it's critically important, but the ongoing behaviour of the lower to middle operator avoids the actual critical behaviour that's required to be successful, of knowing where those leads actually come from. Like, the default activity is like, I'm low on stock, I should go and do some letterbox drops or billboards or bus stops or but that's just not a long-term sustainable play.
Yeah, the interesting conversation, like someone said to me the other day, XYZ, all these competitors have been ringing us about our training. And I'm like, and what do you say to them? I said, oh, no, we use Josh. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I said, but you know what? I can guarantee you I've never cold called an agent in the entire time I've run my training business.
Yeah.
I've always worked on existing relationships, and one person referred me on to someone else. And then off the back of that, then we had a major content strategy around videos and podcasts and audio and daily emails and all of that other thing. But it's actually really important about how you go to generate your leads. The second thing is, if you want to win and become number one in your marketplace, what are you actually going to say in that listing presentation that allows customers to go, you're good, I'm going with you, I want to pay 1% more, and by the way, I want to spend an extra $5,000 of marketing because your story was that awesome.
Yeah.
And
yeah, no, I totally agree, Josh. It's it's I think inside organisations, it's having the ability to get the cut through of learning what is actually going to get the result versus an activity that maybe might make you feel good in the moment but is actually going nowhere.
And I think you've been a really good one about that, like cut out the noise and drive the narrative. Don't worry about any of that stuff. This is actually what we do at Harris. We do this and we do this, and we're for vendor paid marketing. We love an auction sales process, and we love 28 days or less if it's for sale. But everything that we do is about really making sure we have a great customer experience. It leads you to the final part, like literally if you're going to win, how do you actually sell the things? Because it literally, if you sell it well and you get great open for inspections, you grow a database, like there's a whole range of things that actually really are important. And I just love that. I think that, one of our great friends in the business, James Curtin, who happens to work up at Place up in Brisbane, he always just says, you know what, Josh, 2 listings from every sale. Yeah, it's just such a basic formula. Okay, great. How do we get one from the buyers that we already know? How do we get one from the neighbours that we get to meet during the course of that campaign? Phil, if you just had like a strategy that simply, could that get you to number one in a marketplace?
Oh, unquestionably. Like, it blows my mind, Josh, how, you have certain agents out there doing, particularly Satellite Marketplace, with how you're doing open homes with 30, 40, 50 people turning up. And people are, how'd you go on the weekend? Oh, you had 34. How many appraisals did you buy? I got no appraisals out of an open home of 40 people. So I was like, what are you actually doing?
And this is a great conversation to get right that, now if you want a great business, just generate more out of what you already do rather than having to do a whole heap of extra, that literally won't necessarily get you the leads. And today, here's our final principle. We're going to talk about dream, leap, fight, climb, arrive. I read these words in a book called Illuminate maybe about a decade ago. And it always just gets me to think, Phil, that, from a principle point of view, first of all, you got to dream. But if you're going to get to where you want to go in life, you're going to have to take a massive leap. And that's action, and that's desire, and that's decisions, and it's behaviors to make that happen. And expect that there literally will be challenges along the way. You're going to have to fight some of your long-held beliefs. You're going to have to fight some people around you. You're going to have to fight literally in order to be able to get to that new level of growth. And some of those are more internal than external. And then all of a sudden, as you start to gain strength, then you're going to need to start to climb. And that climb, that will, bring different challenges, and there will be different weather conditions on the mountain on the way up to Everest every day. That we've got to learn how to get there. And then we get to a position that then we get to arrive. And, once you've arrived, I think it's the perfect time to start out again. What are your thoughts about that as a great metaphor for life and getting you to think about, the principle of what you can do to dream, leap, fight, climb, and arrive?
Do we ever arrive? I feel like I've been stuck in fight for 20 years. Yeah. I'm not sure if it actually...
Well, mate, believe it or not, you did. But you know what? What you're really good at is at the moment you arrive, you don't celebrate it too much.
Oh.
And this is the interesting thing. There's a great book called Survival. And I'm going to ask you the question. Do you reckon that more people who climb Everest die on the way up or on the way down?
Without contextualize, I'd say on the way up, but
always on the way down.
Yeah.
It's always on the way down. Very rarely on the way up. Because what are you doing? You're climbing towards the goal. And they reckon that literally one of the biggest issues in climbing down Everest is because everyone was chained to each other, like, with a rope or whatever. You'd have like the guy who's at the back who was the weakest out of the group, right? And he was all of a sudden taking in the view. Trips on a rock, falls and tumbles, picks everyone off the mountain. And, so from that point of view, I think that whole idea is that, like, what you've got to start thinking about, like climbing to a goal is massively important. But the moment that you've arrived is the perfect time to start again.
Are you sure about that data, Josh? Or do you think it's just because their ass is freezing more on the way down? They've been up there longer, or is there actually science to that?
There is science to it, so you got to do a bit more reading, Phil, to get to that level of capability. But, mate, awesome to spend some time with you today on the podcast.
Cheers.
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.